Hey guys, this is Eckhart Slaughter. Hello and welcome to another Star Wars The Mandalorian review episode. Now, in the background right now, I've got some support footage from Star Wars Squadrons from Charlie, who helps me over at X2. So if you want to learn more about the game, consider subscribing over there. But I will also be including some screenshots and stuff from the episode. Now, today's review will be almost completely spoiler-filled. I will give my brief spoiler-free impression right now, and I really liked it. It wasn't a filler episode like some were concerned about. I really like the world building that goes into these sort of slower, almost side adventure episodes, although that's not what this one was. So for me, it was perfect. It was exactly what I wanted before we get what we're all expecting in episode 5. But with that being said, I think we need to just move on to spoilers. So I certainly wasn't alone in predicting this, and it's not a difficult prediction either, but I was correct when I said that the Mandalorian would be returning to Nevarro this episode to have the Razor Crest repaired. This episode was directed by Carl Weathers, the actor who plays Greef Karga, as I'm sure most of you know, and it was his directorial debut in the show. It was pretty obvious that Carl Weathers wasn't going to be the one to handle Ahsoka's big reveal. That will obviously be Dave Filoni next episode. And it also makes sense that Carl Weathers would handle an episode highly featuring himself and kind of the classic crew from season 1. And I will say, it was really cool to revisit Nevarro. The planet itself has been quite prosperous in the time the Mandalorian's been away. The Empire, though they do have one base remaining, is not nearly as big of a presence on the planet. We see kind of a statue of IG-11 in the town square representing his sacrifice and helping to free the town, which is, well, awesome. And Greef Karga has become like a proper administrator, and I don't think he will be leaving this planet anytime soon, although Cara Dune, who is sort of grappling with her ties to the rebellion and her fight versus the Empire versus, staying here as she's called a marshal now, is interesting, and I won't be surprised if she maybe goes off and does something in the future. Continuing on Nevarro as a planet itself before we move on to the more substantial sections, I just love this planet. I think it's got a really interesting kind of atmosphere to it. I like the lava flows and the sort of harsh environment, but also the bustling and also pretty vibrant community that they've got set up. And we even had that in season 1, but it's been magnified now. We get that cool scene where they drop the child off at like an elementary school and the teacher's giving Star Wars EU knowledge to the students. She mentions the Hydian Way and the 5 major hyperlanes across the galaxy, which is actually something I talked about just a couple of days ago on the channel. So that was just a little thing, but it was nice to have that thrown in because it kind of anchors it to the universe and references stuff you don't usually see outside of books. So the general plot of this episode is that the Mandalorian needs to have the Razor's Crest repaired, so he goes to Greef Karga, and Greef Karga repairs the ship, but in return the Mandalorian is to help Greef, Cara Dune, and funny enough the Mythrol from episode 1 of the series help take down an Imperial base. And I want to add about the Mythrol and Greef Karga especially, I felt like the acting from those two characters was a lot more natural, especially with the Mythrol. It was a little jarring in episode 1. Not bad per se, but not as good as it could have been. I thought that it was better this episode. I'm not sure if that was just because the characters are more experienced in the show, or maybe because Carl Weathers as a director managed to get more out of them. Either way, I kind of like the Mythrol always. He's a funny character. He's got lots of weird biological functions that are always being brought up. So as a driver and a reluctant combatant, I thought he was a nice addition to the episode, and I just really like that group together, especially the main 3 of it. But this wasn't just a side quest or a filler episode. Not at all, actually. This episode did a great job of sort of making some of the season 1 plot points return to the fold, because I did feel like season 2 was maybe getting a little too centered around the journey of bringing the child to Ahsoka when there was a lot brought up in season 1 that's still relevant. This episode sees Moff Gideon's threat kind of crystallize even more than it had been last episode. The Mandalorian is now fully aware that Moff Gideon did not in fact die. And of course, maybe more interestingly, we see the cloning and Imperial experimentation ideas from season 1 also come back into the fold. We've got that doctor, the probably Kaminoan cloner, and all of that intrigue. I'd say the first major mystery of the show besides who is the child is kind of rearing its head and returning to the fold, which is nice. It kind of helps anchor the show to the original premise. And I also think the Empire works pretty well for a show show like this, even if it is just an Imperial remnant, like fighting stormtroopers just feels right and visiting Imperial bases. This almost felt like a mission out of the Dark Forces series or the Jedi Knight series. Specifically, it kind of reminded me of Kyle breaking into Kejim from Jedi Knight 2. I will say though, the action in this episode was pretty good, but it wasn't as well choreographed, I thought, or interestingly filmed as we've gotten in the rest of the season, especially in the 3rd episode. Like, it was a lot of pretty standard gun battles. I'd say Cara Dune had some good moments, but even those weren't filmed as well, I would say, as we got in the past. The Imperial base, for example, was a lot of hallway running. It reminded me almost of A New Hope. It wasn't bad, but to me, the action was the least interesting part of the episode, at least until we got up to the chase, but I'll probably return to talk about that later. Inside the Imperial base, of course, aside from finding a communication to Moff Gideon, the quad, I almost said trio, but there's 4 of them now, also finds some weird floating body in liquid. Probably a clone. We hear the cloner refer to an M count of blood and blood transfusion and using the child's blood. It's like they're attempting to bring this clone to life or make it viable, but they've been having some real difficulty, and this is surely one of the reasons, if not the primary reason, why Moff Gideon is tracking the child right now. What is the clone? Well, I don't know. I heard a lot of people say Snoke. I don't know. There was some Plagueis-like music, kind of the low chanting sound, when the clone showed up, and people are saying they see the scar on the clone's forehead. That apparently is a Snoke giveaway, but I don't know. I don't really buy it. Snoke would have been something being worked on by Palpatine, probably on Exegol, or at least with the Sith Eternal. This is some backwards Moff. It doesn't make sense for this to be Snoke, and I don't think the show has ambitions that large when it comes to influencing the rest of the sequel trilogy and the Star Wars continuity, nor should it, in my opinion, because if we start getting into the formation of the First Order and whatever else, I might roll my eyes a little bit. I think this is most likely some sort of super soldier that Gideon is trying to create, and we do get more of that later, but first of all, we have that awesome speeder chase. The good guys steal what early EU probably would have called a repulsor lift truck after having disabled some features on the base, which is basically causing it to explode. The chase was action that was, in fact, I thought, really well done compared to like the hand-to-hand and ground stuff. The vehicle had a real weight. The special effects, of course, as they always are in the show, were just phenomenal. That scene where the 2 speeder bikes crashed and then exploded was really funny. And the TIE fighters felt like a real threat until, of course, the Mandalorian and the Razor Crest blew them out of the sky. I was left wondering how repairs were affected that quickly, but whatever, I don't really care in the long run. That scene was really fun. I don't love the Razor's Crest as a ship. I think it's a good choice of a ship for the show, but it's kind of ungainly and ugly, so it was interesting seeing it fight those 2 TIEs and having it do spins and stuff, because we don't normally see it dogfighting. We see it do a lot of traveling, we see it doing a lot of running from enemies, but never like one-on-one combat like we saw here, so I really enjoyed that. And Yoda watching this, or sorry, the child watching this happen, just with sheer delight on his face, was really funny. He throws up a little bit and the Mandalorian wipes his mouth off with his cape. It was just a perfect end to the episode, I think. At least besides for the actual ending, because we get this beautiful shot of an Architans class command cruiser, which a lot of people already knew was coming to the show because of a merchandise leak, but it looked phenomenal. The inside looked, exactly like you'd expect it to. And we get the reveal that Moff Gideon will be tracking the Mandalorian, which should bring him directly back into the fray, and he's working on a secret project with what looks like Death Star technicians. They're working on Cylons, which of course will bring forward the eventual Battlestar Galactica Mandalorian crossover. I'm just joking, they do look like Cylons, which to me indicates that they look like early Dark Troopers. Dark Troopers were basically a super soldier / super droid line from the Dark Forces series, and someone on Reddit posted an image which kind of compares the Phase 1 Dark Trooper with what we see in the Mandalorian, and they do look very, very similar. I honestly can't tell if they're human or droids, though. I think probably humans, just because the suit is pretty large, and maybe that's connected to what Gideon's doing. He has this kind of advanced armor. Maybe he wants to add a force-sensitive wielder to it, which again would be very, very Dark Forces-like. All I will say is that I hope these guys have a really badass and scary introduction. Give them their own music, make them absolutely brutal. These have to be enemies the Mandalorian does not want to fight, unlike stormtroopers, which you usually know our good guys can overcome. But that's most of what I wanted to mention for this episode. I thought it was really great. I loved it. People were saying this would be filler. I thought people might say that too, and I guessed that we wouldn't get Ahsoka in this episode, but I thought this was phenomenal. It did tell sort of a side story, but one that ended up connecting into the larger narrative really, really seamlessly while having us visit some of our old favorite characters. There were a few smaller moments I liked as well. I thought the child trying to fix the electrical system was hilarious, and having a couple of kids myself, I just, realized that was never going to work. The child stealing the Star Wars macaroon and then getting sick was also something I could relate to as a parent and very funny. And I also liked the return of that New Republic pilot at the end. I like the idea that, and it's the actor from Kim's Convenience, I'm not sure his name, but I like the idea that he's sort of just in the outer rim and he has to do more as a pilot because he's not getting a whole lot of New Republic support probably. He's kind of working with locals, he's kind of a little bit of official New Republic presence in the area, so he's doing everything. I also did enjoy that weird ferret thing. I thought that was a good bit of puppeting. But that's all I've got for you guys today. Hope you have a good one. More Mandalorian stuff coming between episodes, I'm sure. I'll probably put a few videos out, maybe one talking about the Snoke clone or the not Snoke clone in my opinion, once spoilers are a bit more kind of out there, maybe on Tuesday or Wednesday. Until then, have a good one, be safe, and may the Force be with you.